Hey, it's TDA and welcome to episode 22 of our perfect ratio run. And as our rockets are launching behind us and spurting off to build our Dyson Sphere, really cool site by the way. Yeah, we are building a Dyson Sphere, but we haven't actually built anything to make use of the Dyson Sphere because of course we need ray receivers to do that. I intentionally kept to this order because it takes quite a while for your Dyson Sphere to build, and doesn't really make sense to have all those array receivers waiting when you actually have no way to use them. And that's also why we built the rockets first and then the silos. Anyway, makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. What I didn't build at all is solar sails and EM rail ejectors. I did that on purpose because I figured we got this far, we might as well get another pretty hard to get achievement, or maybe not hard, but it's a thing you actually actively need to strive for, and that is the achievement for completing the game without using solar cells. We haven't built them yet, so we got this close, we might as well finish it off. That means we'll be able to get 2 achievements. We will get the achievement for completing the game without using rare resources, as well as completing the game without using solar cells, which I think are 2 achievements that not typically everyone has because of the limitations you put on yourself. That and the no foundations one. I actually do think that one is pretty straightforward. I actually used to do all my runs without using foundations because I found them ugly, but people convinced me it was a good thing to use, and actually it is easier to use foundations than it is not to use foundations, because the soil pile, which was my main consideration for not using foundations, is actually easier to get when you are using them. Anyway, I digress. Let's build some ray receivers and then start working on our white science. Let's jump into it. And there we are, ray receivers. Ray receivers themselves are not the most complicated items to build. Of course, they are in the Resource 3 and the red science, so we've been able to build them since, I don't know, more than a dozen episodes. Probably even far more than that. But they are kind of annoying to build because they need 5 different inputs, and yeah, that'll take some work. And that is also why we're going to start out with the inputs rather than the building itself. So we are going to start with the photon combiners. And this is one of those builds that is small enough that I think we can simply build it together rather than me building it off screen and showing it to you. So let me do that, and we are going to need a few more items. So we need processors as well, as you just saw. And processors themselves need, of course, the components to build. So we are going to need 2 of those as well. And then, of course, what else do we need? We need circuit boards. So we are going to be building those over here. There we go. And the nice thing about those circuit boards is that when we are going to belt them in over here, we can actually use them for the photon combiners as well. Now, what else do we need? We are going to need quite a few things, actually. We are going to need prisms on a belt somewhere. So remember, this is our circuit board belt. We are going to need a prism belt as well. It almost sounds like a prison belt, but that's something else, I suppose. Anyway, and we are going to need the supermagnetic rings, and we are going to need quite a few of those because the demand of those, if you look at the recipe, we're going to need 20 of them every 8 seconds, so that's quite a lot. It's actually the most resource intensive part of this build. Of course, the steel has the same amount, but it's way easier to produce. So we are going to need supermagnetic rings for that. And that's going to be 5 of those making that. And then we are going to need the prisms, which we can make over here. And of course, prisms themselves are really straightforward, just glass. That's the wrong button, just glass, and yeah, then we should be good with that. So this is the going to be the outgoing belt for the supermagnetic rings, which I keep losing. What else do we need? Well, we have everything we need for this, but in order to make processors, or specifically in order to make components for the processors, we are going to need some copper, and we're going to need some silicon. That's those 2 items. And the nice thing about the copper is that it is also being used by the circuit boards. In order to make those circuit boards, we are going to need that nice amount of iron, and or I keep saying iron, but I was just told it's actually pronounced iron with a silent R. I did not know there was such a thing as a silent R, but okay. You learn every day, I suppose. And yeah, let's make sure we put down 2 of these over here. I think that's going to be perfect alignment. And then we are going to make those produce the iron. It's gonna take me forever to unlearn saying iron with an R. Anyway, if you are also not a native English speaker, I hope you feel for me. And you can tell me in the comments if that you knew all along that it was pronounced iron rather than iron. You English-speaking people can be so weird. Says the guy speaking Dutch, which is probably the most unpronounceable thing to learn if you're... Yeah, never mind. Let's stop bashing each other's languages. Let's be nice, let's be nice. We want that iron to be over here. And then we are going to have the copper over here. And we are going to have the silicon over here. You thought you were signing up for a Dyson Sphere video and then you learned about languages. Alright, these things, they need quite a few different things. We need some graphite. Pretty sure the R is not silent in that. We are going to need the magnets, and we are going to need, of course, the turbines. And the turbines are actually going to come from the other direction, like this. So let's be organized and mark this up. We are going to need graphite, magnets, and turbines. And pretty straightforward, we are going to need to place this nicely aligned, otherwise my OCD will start triggering me, and that should be quite tight and nicely aligned, the graphite. There we go. And of course that does not mean we are quite done, because we are going to need that magnets and those turbines, but we will get to that in a little while, because the turbines themselves are actually going to take up quite a lot of space. We are going to need a total of 7 of those. And this is going to be those. There we go. There we go. And of course that means we need twice the amount of that in engines. And let's make sure we space them out properly. There we go. Engines, lots of engines. Quite research. To be honest, the supermagnetic ring part is by far the most resource hungry part of this build. We are going to need 2 more rows of this. No. Like that. There we go. And that's a lot of engines. Now, of course, we don't just need engines, we also need the magnetic coils for that. And those are going to be over here. And why are they going to be over here? Well, simple. Because what else do we have on this belt over here? We have magnets. And guess what magnetic coils need? They need magnets. Magnetic coils, on the other hand, also need some copper, which we're going to be putting on the belt over here. And remember, because the magnetic coils are being used in several places, this is why we spaced them like this. Because if we do it like this way it's in reach of the turbines as well as the engines over here. Now that does mean that because of the fact that we are going to be placing another belt over here with an outgoing belt of engines, that, like I said, we are going to put the turbines on the belt over here. Actually, let's flip that around as well. Not sure why I thought it was going to be the other way. And that should take care of the turbine outgoing belt. And something to always keep in mind, especially with the engines, is because they need 3 inputs and then you need an outgoing belt. You need to make sure you're not placing too much stuff on one side. So that means the incoming items for this build are going to be on the different side. We already have the coils on this belt, so we have an outgoing belt and an incoming belt for the engines on this side. So that means that everything else should be on the other side. which is going to be a belt for iron, a belt for cogs, and we're actually going to place another belt for iron over here. Why? Because we need the third thing for this, and that is the cogs themselves, and the cogs actually need to go the other way around. That was the belt that I should do first. There we go. There we go. And the cogs are going to be over here, and we are going to need a total of 7, I think. Yes, 7. Like this is 5, 6, 7. And cogs over here. And of course they can use the iron belt above them. And the reason I'm putting in 2 of those belts, so like I said, this is going to be an iron belt. Nope. There we go. This is going to be cogs belt. And this is also going to be an iron belt, is because the throughput on this belt is actually going to be so high, the demand for this iron is so high, that otherwise it won't be able to sustain both the cogs as well as the engines themselves. Which brings me to the fact that we need a lot of iron, so let's start building that. I think this is aligned. Yes, it is. We are going to be putting in, well, let's start with 9. Hello, autosave. There we go. These are 9 iron smelters. And what else do we need? Well, we are going to need an incoming belt for the ore, which is going to be over here. And then actually what we need is a belt for the steel that we also need. Why do we need steel? Well, that's the 5th input that our solar receivers need. And you can directly input those from the iron to the steel, like we've been doing in several builds before. And we only need 8 of those. So the rest of the iron is going to be intended for the cogs as well as the engines, of course. And let's see, we are going to need quite a few more of those. Let me make sure I count these out correctly. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's actually a full line of 15. Yeah, that is 15. Check, check, double check. And there is going to be a belt in between. And then we're going to have another belt, 15. Then we are going to have 9 more. And then actually we are going to swap to, well, still smelters, but we are going to swap to magnets, because we are going to need a buttload of those as well. We are going to be placing 9 of those over here. We are going to be placing down 9 like this. We're actually going to put in 3 more over here. Another full row over here. And that is not even the only ones we are going to be putting down. But in order to make sure we align those properly, we are going to need some more copper. And then we are going to need 9 more copper over here, so 10 total on this belt. And then the remaining magnets are going to be down here. There we go. We are going to be putting all... Where are we going to put all of that? Well, let me show you that in a second, actually. Let's finish building the smelter. So we are going to need a total of 8 smelters for glass. So let's make sure we put down glass. There we go, that's 8. And then we are going to need a whole bunch of silicon smelters as well. 10 in total, so we already have 1, so just 9 more. And that is pretty much all we need. So now we don't need blueprints. Now we have room for an ILS over here, which, if we are a little bit careful about how we place that, we can put it down like this. And similarly we can, well, let's make sure we align that with the other one. Is this aligned? Yes, I think it is. We can place that one down over here. So we have an ILS for all the different smelting materials that we need. Now I just need to put in a billion belts. So let me do that and hook everything up with sorters and be right back. Okay, and this is the same build, still of course, but now with belts and power. So a few things to mention here, because it seemed straightforward probably when I was building everything, but there's quite a few nuances going on here with the belts. So first of all, in order to keep it as compact and symmetric as I could, I had to kind of fiddle around here with these belts for the magnets. So there's a couple of lines of magnets going in here. And of course that also means that we need to supply it with ore, which is on this middle belt in the middle of these two rows, with a little hop going in here. It's actually the only little bridge that we've built in this entire build. If you really want to avoid that, you can just extend the lines a little bit longer, but I thought it looked pretty nice and compact the way it does like this. It also means that the outgoing belt with ore over here is not only being used by this row of smelters, but actually also by this row, because we have an outgoing belt in between here. So we have these two belts combining over here with magnets, then this belt combines into the bigger belt over here with magnets, and then it goes all the way through with some more magnets being added along the way, all the way through to the magnetic coils over there. Now we also have the copper over here, which is actually drawing from the same input belt with the raw ore from over here on the other side. So it's going to this side, while these copper smelters are transporting it on the other belt over here on the top. We have the glass being made pretty straightforward, but the more interesting thing here are the silicon smelters over here, because the silicon is being made over here and then put on this belt, and this belt is going all the way through here into the area where we're building them components, but it's also going all the way around here. Hello, autosave. All the way down here on this belt, because this is where we're going to build our array receiver. So we actually have the silicon on this belt. We have the photon combiners, those on this belt. We have the processors on this belt. Or the other way around, I'm actually not sure. No, I think I got it, yeah. And then we have the supermagnetic rings over here. And we also have the steel over here that we made on the bottom, which is the steel over here. And another nuance thing is that in order to make sure you have enough iron on this belt, and the iron is being used by the cogs as well as the engines, I actually used double rows of, or at least double inputs for the engines, so they could draw from two different belts, because these belts are not perfectly balanced in the sense that the bottom belt is only being used for the copper. No, it's actually partially used for the engines as well. Now that will mean that initially when you start up this build, it might take a little while for it to balance out, because initially, actually no, because we need the cogs before we need the engine, so it should actually balance itself out straight away. Anything else on the belts? Let me think. No, not really. It's, like I said, it's pretty straightforward, but there are some nuances in here. And the other nuances that I didn't mention mostly have to do with the order of the belts in order to avoid spaghetti. So in order to make sure you don't need any corners in the belts, etc., you need to make sure that they're on the right angle. So for example, we have the inputs for the iron on the same belts, or sorry, the inputs for the copper on the same row as we have the outgoing belt for the iron, and we have the same on the outgoing belt for the circuit board, so they each need seamlessly transition into each other, so there's no hops, corners, whatever there. Not that that's the biggest issue in the world, but hey, while we're doing that, it is nice to have that. Now, in order to make these things more efficiently, we of course have now the proliferators, and we are going to need to proliferate all of these items, and we are going to do that over here. And of course, the annoying thing is that with proliferation, if you want to do it nice and organized like this, you run into an issue when the belt is coming from a different direction, so we'll unfortunately have to do something like this. Now we are going to put down an ILS, probably around over here. And this ILS is going to supply some proliferators over here. And now the interesting way how you can do this is by placing down a splitter. And again, this is not rocket science, but I think it's kind of neat to do it like this. If you press tab a few times, you get the different versions of the splitter. Is this the correct height? Yes, it is. Like that. The LS gets kind of in the way. And then you can do something like this. And something like that. I'm not sure if they actually fixed how they interact, the belts and the proliferators now, but it seems to be going a little bit more smooth than it used to. And yeah, that means we need proliferators in this thing, but we also need, of course, the proliferators going out over here. We can actually use a similar trick like that, where we use a splitter, and of course you can simply use a ramp if you want to, but I kind of like how this looks. Yeah, there we go. Now, is this actually cornered slightly? Are we like on a fault line? No, we're not. Anyway, okay, don't know. But I think it seems to be working. And that of course means that all we need to do now is make sure we supply all the ores. And I didn't actually put in our nice little edge on the foundation, so I'll do that and let's see if it works. Alright, here we are. Everything is working now. As you can see, the build has been running for a few minutes already. I did that intentionally because I wanted to show you what the downside is of combining different inputs on the same belt. As you can see, the main issue in the production of our array receivers at the moment is the photon combiners, and the reason that is an issue is because the processors here are sucking up all the circuit boards before they reach the photon combiners. There's only a tiny bit of overflow. Now the overflow is about to fix itself, because as you can see, the processors are currently being overproduced because they claim all the resources first. And that will mean this is going to slow down the production. The photon combiner production is going to increase because the overflow of the circuit boards will all be going through until the last assembler for the photon combiners, and that will mean that this speeds up production, or the consumption I should say, of the processors also stacks up, increases again, because we get more photon combiners and so on. So it takes a couple of minutes for everything to balance out. I call it a downside. It's not really a downside, but that just means that because even though the ratios are as close to perfect as we can get them, because the things start producing in a different order, it takes a while for the entire system to balance itself out. Yeah, not the biggest problem in the world, but I thought it was worth pointing out in case you were wondering, hey, why the hell is everything already done, but the photon combiners are not. As you can see, we have a steady flow of them coming in now, so the production is already starting to speed up. Now, all we need to do is pretty much place down some array receivers, and we can start working on our white science. I have a pretty nice blueprint for that in order to do so, which I will build, and then we will catch up in a second. And here we go. Isn't this pretty? I think it is. It is basically a variation on the polar science hub that I made in one of the earlier episodes, but with a huge difference that this is producing white science, of course, which means we are going to need to get in all the 5 other sciences, just like in the other solar hub, but we don't just need to produce the white science as we're doing in this tower over here, but we also need an input to process the white science. Well, technically you could do that at 2 different hubs. I just like doing it in the same hub. There are way too many array receivers here, but they look cool, and this is mainly supposed to kind of gear up for the end game. As you can see, we are currently producing a pitiful amount of white science, which has everything to do with the fact that these array receivers are drawing on my tiny little Dyson Sphere that doesn't really have that much capability. Remember, placing down more array receivers, if you're capped out on the amount of energy you can draw from your Dyson spheres, pointless. They will simply spread the production between them, similar to when you're low on power in your other stations. And as you can see, I have an ambitious build going on here, but it's not actually doing much because of the amount of rockets involved. Now, so there's already thousands of rockets in this sphere, so kind of looks like nothing, but don't underestimate how many rockets you need to build a sphere. It's producing something like 400, 500 megawatts at the moment, which is, if you want to use it for power, it's quite a decent amount. I mean, yeah, 400 or 500 megawatts, pretty nice amount to get on your planet for free. But of course, if you add in sales, that will quickly ramp up to a lot higher target. But since we're trying to go for the no sales achievement right now, all I need to do is kind of wait out. Continue to build my Dyson Sphere without the sales. And of course, it is still working. It's just not going as fast as we would like it to. Now, the second reason it's not going fast just after you build this is because the ray receivers, and I'll show you how that works. The ray receivers themselves, of course, need to power up. So the longer they are in range of the sun, or not the sun, the Dyson Sphere, the continuous receiving slowly ramps up. And as you can see, I have like 400 megawatts in my Dyson Sphere, but these ray receivers are actually able to collect 6.5 gigawatts of energy, and that is even without using graviton lenses. So you can double the energy throughput of your ray receivers if you put in a graviton lens, preferably a stack of them, and they would last quite a long time. So you can either automate that or even do it manually, because you only need to do it like once every few hours or something like that. But anyway, I digress. Putting in the graviton lens only makes sense if you're actually low on the amount of ray receivers that you have. But right now, even without the lenses, I have way more draw on power than I can actually supply. So even putting in the lenses themselves doesn't really do anything. It seems to do something if you put them in, because of course the power input will double, and so will the production. But it's actually taking a tiny little bit away from every other ray receiver. So even though it looks like you're doubling it, well, you can try it out for yourself. Simply add graviton lenses to all your ray receivers, check again, and the production will be exactly the same as what you started out with. So anyway, all we need to do now is wait. We made our first white signs. We actually made quite a bit of white signs already. But yeah, the sphere is still trying to build up. I will put down a few more production centers for the rockets, so we can speed this up a little bit, and then we will meet back here to make sure we get our achievements. Okay, wow guys. While I was waiting for the final research to be completed, we actually hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel. How amazing is that? I mean, seriously. I just like sharing the game with you guys, let alone sharing it with 1,000 people. I know, of course, there's more people visiting the channel, but 1,000 of you, 1,000 people, just the number is just insane, chose to actually give me the compliment of subscribing to the channel, basically saying, hey, cool content. And that's like getting 1,000 compliments in a couple of months' time. So if you're here, if you're watching this, you're probably one of those 1,000 people, so thank you. It's amazing. I don't want to digress too much from the point of this whole video, but considering this happened while I was waiting, it seemed like a fitting moment to put this in. So yeah, once again, thanks guys. It's just amazing. And as the last few white sciences are ticking away and we are getting close to getting our achievements, and we're looking out over our Dyson Sphere, just looking back over this run, it was really fun to make all those large complicated builds for you guys, with all the perfect ratios included. And of course the perfect ratios will be making a return in the next series as well. We'll be combining it with proliferation, but we're not just going to do the same run over again with proliferation included, because I actually think there is an even better way, more optimal way to play the game. Now, of course, you should be playing the game in whatever way you want, because that's the part of the fun of the game. But you know me, it's part of the channel description even. I like optimizing my gameplay, and I think I found a way that is even more optimized than what we've already been doing, even though it was pretty organized this way. So if you think that's interesting, make sure you join for the next season. And wow, that's a lot of noise. And we got all the achievements that we were aiming for, including apparently the mission accomplished achievements. How do I not have that? I have no idea. I actually finished another run on this channel. Didn't we get it back then? Anyway, we got the 2 achievements that we were aiming for at least. Yeah, so we did it. And I am already preparing the next few episodes on the new run. I will be including a few tips and tricks for new players as well. I found that due to the patch, a lot of new players have been joining the game, and there doesn't seem to be that many larger YouTubers on this type of content really explaining the basics to a lot of people. Of course, there's plenty of earlier videos, but not all of them are really up to date. So I will be including some basic tips and tricks for the newer players as well. So if you're one of those, also make sure you join in. If you're not one of those, the new run is still going to be of interest to you because of all the new mechanics in there and the way we approach the game. So I think you will find it entertaining as well. And yeah, so once again, guys, thanks to the over 1,000 of you by now who sub to the channel, especially all of those people that have been with me from the start. And I hope to see all 1,000 of you in the next one.